what would you tell young people in the audience, the global audience watching? How can we enable policymakers to essentially understand what youth need and enable that?
Maybe I can take a stab at this one. When it comes to youth and policymakers, I think the biggest thing is just helping policymakers to see that we have ideas, right? It's not just a voice. We're not just making noise just because we have ideas. And like I mentioned, there's so much creativity and innovation in this next generation that we think about problems differently. An example in the work that I do, I'm a girls' education advocate, so I do a lot of work around the world trying to get out-of-school girls back into schools. And one thing that I've realized, and I'm sure you all have heard, every single year, UNESCO, UNICEF, they have this large number of out-of-school children, right? Somewhere, I think this year it's around 250 million. And for the past few years, it's been hovering around that number, 220 million, 240, but it's still growing. And so I believe that if we begin to change the metrics that we use to measure child's cognitive development, and we shift our focus from schooling to education, I think that we can see some real change. There's tens of thousands of communities across the African continent, across Asia, where there's no formal school. So how can you ask children to go to what doesn't exist? And in some places where there are schools, children have to walk 5, 10 miles one way. And by the time they get to school, they're exhausted, they're hungry. So how can we expect them to learn? And so what I've realized is it's not just about focusing on school, because school is the brick and mortar traditional building, right? You go there, you learn science, you learn history. But if we start to educate these children and not just focus on sending them to school, then we can teach them skills that they can use to take care of themselves, instead of just mandating they go to school when in situations that's just impossible, right? And another thing that I do, I'm a filmmaker. And so I took this concept, and back in 2016, when I was 13 years old, I started a filmmaking workshop. So I teach basic film and editing schools to girls, to out-of-school youth, and to unemployed women. Because I started film when I was 9, and I was completely self-taught. So I believe that with the right opportunities, others could do exactly the same. So I started that workshop, and the very first class that I held, just 9 months after it, one of the young women who attended, she went out, she borrowed a camera, and she took the skills that she learned and made her own documentary. And she got to shop it around to TV networks. That's a project I've now taught to over 530 students, somewhere around there, in countries like Ghana, Mexico, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. And this all goes back to allowing the youth to use their ideas, use their innovation. I mean, climate is another great example. It's another area where we youth can really use our voices to make a difference. Countries have been using the exact same narrative the past 26 COPs, right? This is year 27. So obviously things have to change. And a lot of the focus, while it's on funding and money, there's a slow emerging crisis in the educational sector. Because now it's raining in places where it never used to rain before, and it's snowing in places it never used to snow. Like here in Saudi a few months back, sand dunes were covered in snow. I mean, that's something we haven't seen before. And so what type of geography are we teaching children? Teachers are going to have to relearn subjects, and local governments are going to have to spend a lot more money and funding on teaching materials, just because our climate is changing. But there's not a lot of focus on that. And I think that if policymakers look at youth and at least understand that we have a different perspective on things, right? We're looking at this world that we live in, and we have quite a bit more time on this earth, and I'm sure we want to see so much change. For me, it's an education or climate and, other global issues like poverty and hunger. And so it just comes down to allowing the youth to use their voice and allowing free creativity and innovation to create solutions to tackle these problems.
Yes, fantastic. And you talk so passionately about this as well. It's really fantastic to hear you speak. Now,